when we're on the edge of sleep, sometimes just drifting off or just waking up, and when we can't see anything. Aliens, UFOs. They visit the Earth from distant galaxies. They have unimaginable technology completely beyond our realm of comprehension. They have some weird, sinister intentions, and for reasons unknown to us, they also like to visit when it's dark. And the same was true of demons when people believed in them. There are certain exceptions to this rule, but I think you will find that magical or paranormal beings tend to live on the side of the Earth that is furthest from the sun, which could make sense in any one case, but absolutely doesn't if you look at it as a factor that unites them all. But to a magician, hey, seems good. If you can make the rules such that the magic only happens at night, this is very good. And actually, oh yeah, I had a guided visualization exercise to keep you all engaged. It's very simple. Just imagine for me, and there's like 6 of you, so I'll do it. Imagine that, just imagine an image of a room in which a seance is about to take place in like minutes. Okay, I assume that the 2 of you who are following this have got one. Are either of these rooms well lit, like with track lighting? No. I ask and answer rhetorically. And seances were a really, really big deal, at least in North America, for quite a long time. So it's not like now where maybe it's a couple of kids in the attic with a Ouija board or whatever. I mean, this was a big industry, and the rules were almost always, near invariably, that it had to be pitch dark in the room. And the answer, if anyone asked, was basically, well, yeah, the spirits only come out in the dark. This is one of those moments where I have to admit that I can't categorically say that no seance has ever been real. I can't categorically say that there has never been and will never be such thing as a ghost. What I can, however, say is that if they are real, in every instance that has been actually studied, they exhibit precisely the limitations that the trick version does. And there is a very good, well-known, perfectly well understood, established, convincing trick version. So it is at least a little suspicious to me that they all live in the dark, and also that there are these rules. Ask any dowser or metal bender or remote viewer. The most interesting thing about this is that if you look at interviews over time, particularly where a skeptic hasn't been involved and then becomes involved, the remote viewer is saying, yes, they just have this gift, they can see things that are hidden from them, and they can project their presence into the air. Then Joe Nickel walks into the room, and suddenly there are numerous restrictions on this ability, and you can't just turn it on like a faucet, and how dare you try to impose your rigid scientific way of living onto this mystical and incredibly fickle ability. Again, I can't tell you, I don't have to tell most of you, but I can't tell anyone that every single example of something like this is fake. What I can say is that the fake version works exactly as well, in some cases better, and that their limitations are identical. Same goes for, let's see, what did I have here? Oh, sure. So there's limits on sensory information. There's also information that's not limited because it's harder for you to see or hear or whatever, but just because you don't know it unless you know. Horoscopes are the best example, I think, of this. Horoscopes work just as well in daylight as they do in the dark, perhaps better. Many people genuinely seem to believe in them, genuinely, if tentatively, I'll say. They're not sure what they believe, but they seem to think they work. But there's nothing about the horoscope that puts a limit on your sensory input. But they do take advantage of principles that very few people really understand. Unless you know what the Barnum effect is, or unless you've done the test. And all it takes is a pair of scissors and at least one friend, but whatever. If you don't understand those specific things, it seems highly implausible that they could be as accurate as people's impression of them suggests. And the fact is that they're not. But if you don't know the precise principles behind the operation, it's easy to be fooled. And you don't have to be a moron. Let me just reiterate. Smart people can be fooled by dumb things if they don't have the right information. And this is historically the main reason why I think magicians have been so important in the skeptics movement. Magicians have that information. Magicians use the very same principles. There are reports of spiritualists using marketed magic tricks, like they went to a magic shop, bought a trick, and then said, "I am psychic, watch this," and did it for people who were paying them to be genuinely psychic. So when I say overlap, this is an almost imperceptible Venn diagram. Spoon bending. Whole lot of rules about spoon bending. Terribly unreliable when there's a skeptic in the room. Silverware, nearly always cheap. Very cheap, too. And Uri Geller would run to the bathroom claiming he had to run water over his hands and the silverware to make it work. Well, if there was no heat on him, he didn't have to do that. If he was among a friendly crowd, he wouldn't have to do that. But when he was, when Ray Hyman or someone was in the room, he needed running water to make it work. And this idea of the rules allowed the entire field of parapsychology to exist, basically, because as was written, and I'm paraphrasing here, not quoting, I tried to get the real quote from Ray Hyman, but he didn't respond in time. One of the people studying Uri Geller for DARPA wrote that the setting had to be aesthetically pleasing for Uri in order for psychic things to happen, and also, and this is the amazing part to me, they could never be sure if the phenomena would manifest, or if they did, what kind they would be. This is exactly the set of rules that you are subject to when you're watching magic. Something will happen, presumably, hopefully, but you don't know what, and you don't know when. So you have no clue what exactly to look for. And the fact that scientists agreed to this, said, sure, yeah, just do whatever, we'll write it down if something bends, is mind-boggling. It's profoundly unscientific, but it's a testament to Geller's charisma, I think, as well. Let's see. Television mediums have one of the most amazing sets of rules I have seen anywhere. I think they might have the best one. Ghosts, evidently, in addition to being the returned spirits of loved ones, are really big on 20 questions. And they start with a single letter, always. And there was actually a John Edwards special that I watched once when I was feeling really masochistic. And a woman in the audience stood up and asked, "Why does it always start with one letter?" And Edward and the other 3 psychics who were on the special just sort of dithered and gave, I think, at least 4 between the 3 of them completely different answers, none of which made a shred of sense. But there is no good answer. That's one of those things that just has to be the rules because it makes the trick work. It is essentially mediumship woofle dust, I think. And as you can see, it works. And part of that, again, I'm not going to go into the intricacies of cold reading here, but part of that is that the technique is really convincing, and if you don't know the specifics of it, it is nearly impossible to backtrack. Some people can do it. I know some people have done it, but there are refinements to the technique, and there are sort of combinations of methods that really that really bedevil people trying to unravel it. And and the average person has never heard the words cold reading at all. So it's tough. It's the point being it's very hard work to unpack these methods. It requires some practical knowledge of them, and magicians tend to have that knowledge. Although the mentalist community does have an uncomfortably close relationship with the fake psychic community. And has, I think, as long as both have existed. Okay, faith healing, very interesting rules. Amputees, screw them. Not going to do it. Jesus has his limitations, evidently. But ailments that are difficult to see without specialized equipment are routinely healed by smacking people in the forehead. Pretty hard, too. And there's no follow-up, first of all. And there's no, and there is evidence that some of the people who think they're healed really hurt themselves. But the one technique I want to call attention to for the purposes of this talk is one that Benny Hinn is known to have used, and I'm sure uses still. Because if you see it done, it's kind of hard to unpack. And this is where people who are evidently paralyzed stand up out of their wheelchairs. Well, as it turns out, there are two sets of wheelchairs at any Benny Hinn gathering, revival. There's one that people arrive in, people who are genuinely paralyzed or immobilized. And then there's one that the venue provides for people who just look sort of decrepit, that they stick them in the wheelchairs to be nice. Security works diligently to ensure that the first set never gets anywhere near the stage at the front. And the sort of the courtesy wheelchairs are wheeled up, and Benny Hinn says to the person, stand up out of it, dramatically commands them. Now what that person is hearing is stand up and come over here so that I can heal your arthritic shoulder. That is the meaning that makes the most sense from that individual's point of view. What every other person at the revival sees and hears is Benny Hinn dramatically commanding someone who is paralyzed to not be paralyzed anymore and stand up and walk, sort of, have a strange love moment right there for everyone. So other than being like incredibly horrifying, this is an important technique to touch on, which is the statement that means one thing to an individual on stage and something completely different to the audience. Psychic performers employ that a great deal. And again, the rules allow, it can be anything, anything they want. You can heal by hitting them or by yelling at them or whatever, unless they're missing a limb. Then, too bad. So, and this is, if I were a heartless, conniving bastard, and I'm not, that's how I would do that trick. And that is the essential point of all of this for me, is that if there are real phenomena out there, just for the sake of argument, assume there is one real psychic. The noise-to-signal ratio is such that, like this little acrylic block, it would be impossible for us to tell. It would be unreasonable at this point to believe in paranormal phenomena, given what we know, even if some of them were real. Because the evidence we have seen overwhelmingly shows that, that the fake versions can be unimaginably convincing and deceptive, even to the people executing them. So sometimes no one's to blame. Everyone's fooled. And that the reports of this kind of thing are catastrophically unreliable. It's just, if all you know about a trick or a paranormal event is what someone who saw it knows, you have roughly no shot in hell of reverse engineering to the correct answer, even if you know a real method, because there's usually more than one way to do these things. So that's, in a nutshell, what we know about magic tells us much of the important stuff we know about why paranormal things seem to happen. And I think, hopefully, that these surface traits I mentioned about in terms of sensory limitation and the rules and the limitations and the story will hopefully be useful for other people who are not magicians, who are analyzing them. And yeah, I had one more sort of little quote here, but it's not that important, so I guess it is Q&A time.